Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Seton Hall University and the School of Diplomacy. Welcome to our first World Leaders Forum event of 2025. We are welcoming His Excellency, Ambassador Philemon Yang, who is the President of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly. I am Courtney Smith, Dean of the School of Diplomacy, and I am pleased to have all of you with us today, both in person and online. Warm greetings to our guest, President Yang, members of his delegation, also to our Board of Advisor members who are present, fellow deans, faculty, alumni, and most importantly, our students. Seton Hall's mission is to empower our students to make a difference in the world. And one way the School of Diplomacy does this is by creating opportunities like today, where our undergraduate and graduate students can learn from distinguished practitioners engaged in the field of diplomacy. This is the fourth time we have hosted the President of the United Nations General Assembly on our campus, and we have also hosted 7 Nobel Peace Prize laureates, 3 UN Secretaries Generals, and 4 US ambassadors to the UN. This reflects our long-standing commitment to and connections to the UN community and our desire to prepare our graduates to build peace and foster social justice. There are some with us today who may not be that familiar with the role that our guest has as President of the General Assembly. So I want to give you just a few words about the scope of work on the agenda for President Yang. The first Secretary General of the UN, Trygve Lie, saw that position as a consolation prize. Instead, he wanted the position that Ambassador Yang has. He wanted to be the first General Assembly President. This may seem a little bit surprising when you think about all of the tremendous complexities that face the President of the General Assembly. This is because the General Assembly is unique among international organizations. It is the only one that has both a universal membership and an expansive agenda, the only one. It brings together 193 member states, each with their own interests and needs. Every one of these members is playing a balancing act, balancing the international interests and realities with also domestic political considerations. And this is when the issues that the General Assembly addresses, things like the climate crisis, the wars in Ukraine, Gaza, and Sudan, for example, are the most intractable and difficult. They couldn't be solved in other venues. What strikes me then is not the cases where the General Assembly fails to act, but the fact that in many cases it does act, and often with a strong degree of consensus among its members about what they want to accomplish. These moments are often the result of the person shepherding negotiations, and that's usually the President of the General Assembly. I would like to now welcome a good friend and colleague, Jahangir Khan, to introduce our guest and highlight how his background is up to the challenge I just described. Mr. Khan is the Secretary General of the United Nations Council of Presidents of General Assemblies, and that's a role that he assumed after a career at the UN, a distinguished career at the UN that included 10 years as director of the UN Counterterrorism Center. In his current role, Mr. Khan regularly supervises and mentors our students as interns with the Council, including 3 this semester, and I am particularly grateful to Mr. Khan for making today's event possible. So, Mr. Khan.
Well, thank you, Dean Courtney Smith, Mr. President Philemon Yang, distinguished guests, distinguished students, professors, academic staff of Seton Hall School of Diplomacy. It's a distinct pleasure and honor to, first of all, to welcome you all, and also to thank Dean Courtney Smith and the School of Diplomacy for the extraordinary collaboration and cooperation that the school has established with the United Nations, and in particular with the United Nations General Assembly. Our organization, the Council of Presidents of the United Nations General Assembly, its main objective is, in fact, to support the President and his office, and I see his distinguished team here, the cabinet here, his chief of cabinet and others. We work very closely. In fact, we were all together in Bratislava just a few days ago with President Yang, with all of his predecessors there. It was the largest gathering. And Seton Hall is playing an important and fundamental role, particularly including through your internship program. We have several of our interns here right now who have been working closely with us, and former interns. And so I think this practical interaction and the visit of His Excellency President Yang, and in particular, this World Leaders Forum, we've had at least 3 former presidents, 4 actually, and former Secretary Generals. It demonstrates the special relationship, I should underline the special relationship between the Seton Hall School of Diplomacy and the school. I should also mention in passing that there are a number of mid-career diplomats at the United Nations that continue to take courses while they serve at the United Nations. So Seton Hall is contributing to the global agenda, to the United Nations agenda, and to strengthening multilateralism. It's my honor to introduce His Excellency President Philemon Yang. He is not only a distinguished United Nations statesman, but he is, if I may say so, also a very distinguished African statesman, and indeed the statesman of his great country, Cameroon. He has been the Prime Minister of his country for many years, serving in very distinguished role as the leader of his country, but also has contributed enormously to the African Union as the chairperson of the Eminent Persons Group of the African Union, which played a very important role recently to the election of the chairperson of the AU. And at the United Nations, from the very first day, I remember he did us the honor of meeting to come to one of our special meetings of the Council of Presidents, to meet with his predecessors literally on the eve of the United Nations Summit of the Future, when in fact the Summit of the Future, as many of you know, was hanging in the balance. And he came to the rescue because, as you know, one of the fundamental roles of the President of the UN General Assembly is to bring consensus, is to forge consensus. This is what the United Nations is all about. And ultimately, it rests on the shoulders of the President to seal the deal. And that's easier said than done, because, as Dean Courtney Smith mentioned, there are 193 countries competing in opposite directions quite often. And certainly, I think from the very beginning, when President Yang arrived, he demonstrated his skills, his personal qualities, and really his ability to bring others together, member states together, and we succeeded. He succeeded in having the Pact of the Future adopted, and now one of his main priorities, we heard in Bratislava, is to see the implementation of the plan. And so, without further ado, I would like to welcome President Yang, and we look forward to his presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do you hear me? Yes. Thank you very much for being very patient and watching me change my glasses. And I thank Mr. Khan very much for this introduction. You made me look great. I must say that I don't have a lot of opportunities like this one to speak to the future, to speak to a group of people that are very special on seeing what is happening in the world now, the conflicts all over. You know you're going to be very important people in the future because you will have to deal with very complex issues. Some of them so complex that solutions will be difficult to find. And a lot of the issues you're going to face wouldn't have mathematical solutions. They wouldn't be like 2 + 2 gives you 4. Sometimes you will have 5 plus 5 and the answer is either 25 or minus 25. So I am very proud of you. I know you're training to be important people in future. Diplomats are very important persons. People in diplomacy are important. And I say so because very often people don't know that, and they think that diplomacy is an easy job. Professor Courtney Smith, Dean of the Seton Hall University School of Diplomacy and International Relations, distinguished faculty, dear students, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to join you today at the World Leaders Forum. You are the future diplomats, you are future leaders, you future thinkers who will shape the world. As President of the General Assembly, I am aware of the duty of the United Nations, to the international community, and you are part of that community. This duty is set out in the opening of the Charter of the United Nations. And the principal responsibilities, the objectives of the Charter are to bring peace and security to the world, to promote sustainable development, promote human rights, and you can add humanitarian law. It is a promise, the promise of the UN Charter, that cannot be kept by simple words. It requires a lot of things to be done. It demands daily action to build a world grounded in peace and security, human rights, and sustainable development. These 3 pillars of the United Nations, pillar number 1, peace and security, 2, sustainable development, human rights, that's number 3. These pillars are handled by distinct organs of the United Nations. The Security Council leads on peace and security. Human Rights Council promotes rights and fundamental freedoms. The Economic and Social Council advances development, you could call it sustainable development. No single organ can bear the weight of that responsibility of looking after issues which concern the whole world at the moment. Upholding these pillars is a collective duty. It's not only for one person, it's for all countries in the world. That duty is shared across the United Nations system and championed by the General Assembly. And the UN General Assembly is the most representative, deliberative body of the organization. I could even say of the world, because there is no other assembly in any place where you have 193 countries represented. When the UN was founded, there were only 50 countries, 51. Now we have 193. That is almost 200 countries. Already dealing with one country is a problem. Can you imagine dealing with almost 200 of them? Over the past 80 years, that is beginning from 1945, this collective effort to bring the world together, to manage world issues, helped to prevent conflict and improve the human condition. And I must warn you, we're not yet in heaven, but we aren't in hell either. The UN has handled issues concerning health, poverty, education, and rights, human rights. And our organization, the UN, United Nations, has invested a lot in order to face the common challenges of the modern world. And when we talk of the common challenges of the modern world, there is a whole long list of them. Is it Gaza? Is it Ukraine? Is it Russia? Is it Sudan? And the list can be very long. And sometimes we are blocked by simply looking at the places where people are fighting. You could also imagine what the UN has been doing for children, UNICEF, for people who are sick in hospital, the World Health Organization. So the United Nations is a very, very organized, very important organization which deals with a long list of issues all over the world. And the United Nations has been seeking to bring progress to a world which is not always easy to handle. And one of the things we're proud of is that this is for the very first time that humanity has been able to put together an organization which is functioning fairly well. It's not perfect. There is no perfect organization. Because those of us, including you, who create the organizations are imperfect. So imperfect people like we are, all of us, can't produce what is perfect. I think Christians would imagine that if God were here, he would have a perfect organization, but we're human, we're not perfect. So the progress we're trying to bring to the world is sometimes difficult, but there are many, many aspects which are well run. Historically, the UN was put in place in 1945. Before then, there was the League of Nations, which unfortunately didn't succeed. It was put in place, I think, in 1999 at the end of the First World War, because the US Congress wouldn't allow President Woodrow Wilson to ratify to get into the League of Nations. Before then, after the fall of Napoleon in Europe, the European countries, only the European countries, came together in Vienna, in the Congress of Vienna, and put in place something they called the Concert of Europe, which wasn't like the UN. It didn't involve the whole world. It simply involved the countries in Europe. And they were able to manage and avoid very dangerous wars or conflicts from about 1815 till 1914, when the First World War started. So our organization is proud of the fact that we've been around for 80 years. And among these essential partners we have to work with so we can succeed. Amongst these partners, we have institutions like yours, Seton Hall University. Your institution is a wonderful institution, and institutions like yours contribute to what the UN is and will be in future. How? By simply fostering knowledge, by simply spreading the right knowledge, by sharpening critical thinking, by taking young people like you are and making out of you diplomats, those who will be leaders in future. You're already doing a lot for the whole world, for the international community. And because of this, we're also looking forward to a commitment, in nurturing a commitment to serve the whole community. We prepare you for what we commonly call multilateralism. Another expression for this is international cooperation. All the countries of the world coming together so that they can work and do things which are not always done by single countries. Seton Hall in particular has made a direct contribution to the work of the United Nations. Your collaboration with the Council of Presidents of the General Assembly to develop a handbook for the future presidents is wonderful. The handbook stands out as a model of what an academic institution working in partnership with the UN can do. My dear friends, we live in turbulent times. That is perhaps an understatement. There are conflicts and tensions in different parts of the world. Some of them, we didn't create them directly. Individuals present here didn't create them. For instance, climate crisis is worsening, and our response, the response of the world, remains weak. Conflicts rage from the Middle East to Sudan to Ukraine, and multilateral diplomacy is under increasing strain. The nations of the world and international organizations must reflect, think clearly so that we may find solutions. We must uphold the principles of the United Nations Charter and respect international law. We must respect and promote human rights and human dignity. We must put forward everything we can do to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We must harness the promise of technology, especially artificial intelligence, and close the digital divide. And we must stop ourselves from returning to the horrors of the early 20th century by embracing diplomacy and dialogue. When I talk of the early 20th century, we think of the First World War, which was terrible. The Second World War was even more terrible than the first. And all this, we seek solutions through diplomacy and dialogue. And talking of dialogue, I think dialogue is so important that we ought not to minimize it. Some great thinkers have said, all the wars end with diplomacy and dialogue. Going back centuries, you could go back to the 30 Years' War in Europe, from 1618 to 1646, which ended with the Treaty of Westphalia. Even that one, the negotiations went on in Germany for a long, long time, because at the time communication was very difficult. You couldn't, like you today, you young people, you take your phone and you can talk to somebody in another part of the world. And people can speak to people in the International Space Station or people traveling in space. Before, it wasn't that easy. You, the world of 1.2 billion young people, are the torchbearers of transformation. That is a reality recognized in the Pact for the Future, which was adopted last September by the leaders of the world. It was adopted by the heads of government and heads of state when they came to New York, not far away from you. The Pact offers a shared vision for a multilateral system which is more just, more inclusive, and more effective. And we are very optimistic that this pact will help us deliver across the United Nations system on all the three pillars which the UN put in place as its objectives. The Pact for the Future presents a multilateral system that upholds peace, respects human dignity, and drives transformative action for the development of the world. The two annexes to the Pact for the Future lay down a number of commitments. The first annex concerns the Global Digital Compact, which aims to close the digital divide, govern technology responsibly, and share its benefits fairly all over the world. The second annex is the Declaration on Future Generations, which seeks to bring long-term thinking into the United Nations work and ensure we act with tomorrow in mind. If we make mistakes today, we can destroy the world that is to come. That is your world. Because in the next 50 years, most of you will be running the world. You've already started to run the world. You are the leaders. But I am convinced that in 50 years from now, you'll be the key leaders deciding what happens to the generations that come afterwards. So if we make mistakes today, we put everybody in trouble in future. All member states must be key players in the implementation of the Pact for the Future. And rest assured, I am determined to help translate the Pact's vision into real outcomes for the world's 8 billion people. To this end, just a few weeks ago, I launched the first 3 informal interactive dialogues to support member states in advancing the implementation of the Pact for the Future. Indeed, the responsibility is ours to prove that multilateralism or international cooperation is more than a simple slogan. International cooperation is crucial, Member states can both compete and cooperate at the same time. I mean, no state today in the modern world has to be the enemy of another state. You could go from commerce to money to every other thing. Every state is intelligent enough to compete with all the other states, the 193 states, but also cooperate at the same time. The greatest power we now have is cooperation. And we human beings have that big advantage to be able to cooperate because we know what we're looking for. We must lead by example, demonstrating that global problems need global solutions. And we must collectively embark on the journey of global transformation. No country, however powerful, however rich, can solve alone the great challenges that confront us. It means that all of us, each of the countries taken alone is weak, because no one country can deal with all the complex issues all over the world. And I think the greatest advantage, the greatest power we have is that we can come together, look in the same direction and do the things, even the things that have never been done before. This means that instead of looking at each other, we look in the direction and we have objectives to attain. And I think very often our countries are looking at each other instead of looking in the direction we want to go. You human beings, if you keep looking at each other, you will suddenly discover that there's something wrong in the face of your friend. But if you look in the direction you're going, what you want to achieve, you're going to do better. You will see the greater things that bring you together rather than the things that set you apart. Only by bringing together diverse voices can we meet our common goals. And the General Assembly of the United Nations is that place where everybody can come and express themselves. It is the parliament of humanity. The parliament, the US Congress isn't the parliament of humanity. The British House of Commons isn't. L'Assemblée Nationale de Paris isn't. You go all over the world, you wouldn't find such a place. At the United Nations, the General Assembly is a place where everybody can be heard, where you can speak, you can say everything, and we listen to everybody and learn from everybody. And by the way, a statesman whom I respect very much is no longer alive, an American, said that the United Nations was created so that instead of taking our guns and killing each other, we have a place where we can speak. And very often we can speak politely to each other, and no one dies. It's only an exchange of ideas. We prepare at the UN, I could say the word, to mark the 80th anniversary of the United Nations Charter. And this will be in June the 26th of this year. We must use this symbolic milestone to reaffirm the organization's relevance. That's the relevance of the United Nations. If the United Nations didn't exist, we would be forced to create one. Why? The challenges the world is facing are so complex that we ought to have an organization as we have, which comes together and can deal with the different issues. We should be able, on the 80th anniversary this year, to inject fresh momentum into our multilateralism. All nations have an obligation to work with each other. My office is organizing 2 high-level meetings to highlight the central importance of the United Nations to our system, multilateral system. The first will be on the 26th of June. We will commemorate the signing of the charter in San Francisco, in your country, in California. The celebration will enable us to reflect and imagine new ways of working for the international community. It will offer member states a chance to rekindle the spirit of 1945. The spirit of San Francisco, led by the nations of the world, got us to the point where we created the United Nations. The second ceremony this year will be in September during the high-level week, and it will highlight the achievements of the multilateral system, that's the UN system, over the past 80 years. That ceremony will emphasize all that is possible when we work together to build a future for the countries of the world. Indeed, the Pact for the Future and the 80th anniversary complement each other. The objective of the Pact is to renew multilateralism grounded in the enduring relevance of the United Nations and the UN Charter. The Charter is like the Constitution of the United Nations, like the US has a constitution. The Charter is the main document which says how the UN is organized, what can be done and what cannot be done. The Charter is from the fundamental text that regulates the functioning of the UN. The organization's 80th anniversary offers a timely opportunity to recommit to collective action and drive meaningful reform. The Pact, in turn, provides a clear blueprint for transformation. The Pact of the Future translates shared principles into practical priorities. My dear friends, as we reflect on the enduring power of multilateralism, that is the United Nations codes, which puts in place international cooperation, we must admit that the institutions we have, that is the institutions of the United Nations, you could in fact say this of any international institution, must evolve and must adapt themselves to our present realities. Our world is not the world we knew in 1945. The present system of the United Nations needs some adaptations. Everybody's agreed on that, and the Pact for the Future admits that we need adaptations. Some people use the big word reform. Why would one use adaptations comfortably? A scientist called Charles Darwin said that if an organism or any living thing doesn't adapt itself to changing circumstances, it will be in deep trouble. It will probably not survive. So the UN needs some reforms at the level of the Security Council. Because when the Security Council was put in place, there were only 50 countries. Now we have 193. It's absolutely necessary that other parts of the world be represented in the UN Security Council. And the Security Council, by adapting itself, will be more qualified, better placed to deal with the complexities of our world. Consider that when the United Nations was established, there were only 51 member states. Today, there are 193 member states. Humanity has never before tried to manage 193 countries together. I say so because there are lots of people out there who believe the UN has failed, hasn't done anything good. I think that would be a dangerous, unfair conclusion. The UN has succeeded in doing many, many good things. But one can add that there are still things that could be done and even done better. So the reforms are absolutely necessary, and at the UN at the moment, we're working on the reforms. For instance, continents like Latin America, Africa, and much of Asia lack permanent seats in the United Nations Security Council. It would be a good idea if these parts of the world could have permanent seats in the UN Security Council. We must also ask, can the developing world truly develop while trapped in cycles of unsustainable debt? There are countries which merely get by because the loans they get from the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund become more of a burden than an instrument of development. These are all issues for us. Does the current international financial architecture empower countries to lift themselves out of poverty? I would say no. There will be a conference in Spain this year, I think in July. The objective is to re-examine the international financial architecture so that the developing countries which go to the World Bank, to the International Monetary Fund, or to the European investment banks will have a greater voice and have a greater opportunity to be able to work together with those who have the money. Because if you don't get the developing world better developed, migration might become a real problem for everybody. I'm not saying that there's an easy solution. Human beings in history have kept traveling from one place to the other, but we need now to look at this and make sure that we create a world which is the world we want to be in. It's not always easy. And finally, we must consider how to revitalize the work of the General Assembly itself, the General Assembly I chair. That will enable the General Assembly to deliver more effectively on its mandates and restore trust in global governance. It is absolutely necessary that we have a United Nations General Assembly which enjoys your trust, the trust of all the people. That is your assembly. You don't attend meetings at the General Assembly, but it's in fact your assembly because the US is represented there. All countries of the world are represented at the General Assembly. As President of the General Assembly, I ask myself each day, what can I do while I hold this office to advance progress? The role gives me the chance to convene, to spotlight, to bring people to have open dialogue on a number of world issues. That is why I launched the Palava Tree Dialogues, informal morning conversations with permanent representatives, ambassadors of member states, ambassadors who are the UN representing their countries. The Palava Tree Dialogue is another name for what other presidents before me called morning dialogues. It's just an opportunity where you can speak without anybody taking notes. And you can say what you've always wanted to say, but probably didn't have an opportunity to say. And you can discuss like in an African village where people sit under a tree and they keep discussing until they find consensus. At the UN, we also seek consensus because consensus is marvelous. You know why? Because when you find a solution by consensus, there is no election, there is no voting. So at the end, everybody is a friend, everybody is cooperating. But if you had to elect, you had to vote, then there will be a winner and there is a loser. If you keep losing all the time, you might become that is fine. Perhaps a warning that I've been talking for too long. So when we have the dialogues, we're seeking to discuss so that we can arrive at some conclusions, but not necessarily. We will promote the dialogue so we can discuss the key issues, some of the important issues which involve the future. I also take seriously my designation as an international gender champion. Gender issues are important to me because the world in which we live has to deal with gender issues. In the world, we have women and men. And I don't know who said it, but it applies to all of us. that the human society is like a bird which flies with two wings. One wing is male, the other one is female. So why wouldn't you fly around with the male and the female all the time? So we need some gender balance. We need to give opportunities to women and girls. And I'm particularly interested in gender equality, economic empowerment of women and girls, because these issues are central to my session. It's high on my agenda. Because no global challenge can be solved while women and girls are held back in many parts of the world, we must include them in everything we do. Alongside these priorities are a set of initiatives tied to the United Nations 3 pillars: peace and security, human rights, and sustainable development. Each of these is intended to spotlight and address specific issues that require international attention. On peace and security, I intend to have a joint meeting with the President. I already convened a joint meeting with the President of the Economic and Social Council to address a delicate issue: the threat of small arms and light weapons. This is a threat not only to peace, but to development. In June this year, we'll hold a high-level debate on the future of peacekeeping in Africa. Peacekeeping is quite a problem all over the world, but particularly in Africa. On human rights, we began the year with a dialogue on the importance of respecting and upholding international humanitarian law to protect human dignity during armed conflict. Dignity is key. You may be rich, you may live in an apartment in Manhattan, you may drive a Lamborghini or some expensive car, but if you don't have human dignity, that doesn't take you far. So we take the issues of human dignity very seriously. In May, we will follow up with a session on eliminating child labor in all its forms, including forced recruitment and the use of children in armed conflict. This is not common in the developed world, but they are developing countries where many people, I don't want to call them criminals, but they come dangerously close to being designated as criminals. They use children in armed conflict. And very often the children are too young to make the choice whether or not they want to be fighting, they want to be using arms. On sustainable development, we held a hearing last February with the Interparliamentary Union on scaling up action and financing the Sustainable Development Goals. In July, we will convene a dialogue on advancing the Sustainable Development Goals in Africa with a focus on digitalization and entrepreneurship. Now, all of you have access to telephones and to computers. There are parts of the world where a telephone is very difficult to come by. And there are villages where there is hardly a TV set. I mean, for you, this is so normal that you wouldn't imagine anybody living without TV. So there is a digital divide in the real world. And we are convinced that eventually our world should be addressing issues of that nature. And recently, I was very happy when I heard that in the US, telephones will probably come in without a very high tariff on them. It means that telephones wouldn't be as expensive as they might have been if certain tariffs were put on them. But that vision cannot come from institutions alone. It depends on you. You are the world. You are all the leaders of today, and you'll be the leaders of tomorrow. You are not just observers of the global affairs, you are contributors in many ways. In fact, you are practitioners because there are many ways in which you're contributing. Armed with your critical thinking and ambition to serve, you bring the energy that this world system urgently needs. Your ideas are important for the world that is to come. This session of the General Assembly has opened space to confront the world's hardest challenges. Your task is to keep that space open and fill it with ideas that are bold, practical, and inclusive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Yang, for your remarks that were at times inspirational, at times sobering, but very clear about the challenges that we face and the importance of the members of our audience today in addressing those moving forward. We're going to begin our conversation with some questions from the students here in the front of the room, and then we'll open it up to members from the audience. Earlier in your remarks, you mentioned that no one country can go it alone. And on that spirit, I'd like to turn it over to Julia Brown to ask our first question.
Thank you very much for coming. Your Excellency, how has the new U.S. presidential administration affected international collaboration at the UN, and what is your strategy for engaging with President Trump?
Thank you very much. Well, the United Nations is an organization which has all the members of the world, all the countries. And the US is a very important country within the UN. The US is one of the major contributors to the work of the UN. And President Trump has been in power for 2 months, 3 months. So we're just at the beginning. And no final statement has been made about what will happen to the US contributions or what will happen at the United Nations. And we're still waiting for the UN ambassador who will come there to speak on behalf of the United States. Until this happens, it's a bit difficult to know what the positions of the United States are concerning the United Nations. But I can tell you the present world order, that is the United Nations, the US played a very key role and continues to play a very important role all over the world. And so we're very optimistic that the US will continue to play this important role so that the UN can continue to function. Thank you very much.
Thank you. For our next question, we'll go to Ragada.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today. What are the chances of a woman being appointed as the next Secretary General at the UN?
As a Secretary General?
Secretary General, yeah. Secretary General.
Okay. What a beautiful question. There hasn't yet been a Secretary General of the UN who is female. But this is the talk of the day. Many people are discussing it. And the only thing I would say is that, you know, all the high positions in the UN could be occupied by a woman any moment. Just like in all the states of the world, any woman could become president or prime minister. But very often, how the mechanism or what happens before a candidate is selected is sometimes very complicated and has nothing to do with the capability of women or men who don't get selected. So I'm optimistic that any of these days, in the near future, there could be a woman Secretary General. There is already a Deputy Secretary General who is a woman. So I dare tell you, women are not left out of the system. And any day, if there is a woman who is Secretary General, you know the UN will continue to work and you work well. So one of my prayers is that any of these days, a lady becomes Secretary General. Thank you.
Next, we will have a question from Nayada, but you can keep your your mic and she can use Ragadas.
Okay.
Ayada, Brian.
Thank you for coming. Your Excellency, over the past decade, technology has advanced significantly. How can we best navigate the risks that is posed by artificial intelligence?
Oh. Now you asked the type of question which has interested me for a long time. Science, technological advancement, innovations are here to stay. We really have no choice. The only power we have is to regulate and organize ourselves so that we can manage all these advances. And I dare tell you, technology is so powerful. If we didn't have technology, we would be like the primitive, they say primitive man, we could say primitive human being, who lived all alone in the jungle and didn't have any conflicts with anybody. But that human being had to deal with the wild beasts. And very often the human being was killed by the animals for food. So in embracing technology, technologies come with a lot of risks. They are wonderful, but come with a lot of risks. Even the telephones I see around are already quite risky because you can imagine what young kids can watch. But if we make the proper rules, make the rules that are good, then the technologies can be used. And I think artificial intelligence is here to stay. All we have to do, and your question is important, is make sure that we lay down the proper rules so that no one human being misuses the technology to have fun or for their own interests. And let me give another example which can drive this home to you. All the medications sold in pharmacies are part of technology. They are not artificial intelligence, but they come from very brilliant scientists. Every medication has to be properly taken under the guidance of a doctor. Improperly used, that same medication can cure you and kill you the following day. So my prayer, and I think this is the wish of most people like I am, is that we will regulate the use of artificial intelligence, regulate the use of the phones, regulate the use of computers, so that a young child will only deal with certain issues on the computer. Whereas me, an adult, when I go to the computer, I should have the freedom to see or do what I want to do. So artificial intelligence is here to stay. Human beings must regulate that very well. And let me make a last statement. Now, all the time, we keep talking of artificial intelligence as if this were the only intelligence. You and I, the human intelligence we have is by far more powerful than that artificial intelligence. And we have the power to regulate that artificial intelligence so that criminals do not use it to harm us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. The next question is going to go to Trenton Stevens.
Thank you. Your Excellency, how do you envision fostering unity on a global scale, especially in times of increasing polarization?
Unity across the globe is in fact an ideal. Excuse me if I'm wrong. In fact, the unity on the global scale has started. Before, young people like you are, and I praise you, you look so great, I'm happy to be here, came home from one war to go to another, to prepare for another. Even in Europe, when Napoleon established the empire, covering the kingdoms, the Habsburgs and all the like, Hohenzollern and the like, the Romanovs. They went from one war to the other, but now the European Union is an example. that countries can come together and instead of fighting, speak about cooperation. The UN is already doing something wonderful. As I said, we're not yet in heaven, but we aren't in hell. And you're going to tell me immediately, well, what of Ukraine, what of Gaza, what of Sudan, Democratic Republic of Congo? These are exceptions. But I think as we continue to work together, and intelligent people like you study diplomacy and dialogue, you will help the world understand that there is no use fighting each other. We should be talking to each other and negotiate all the disagreements we have. And the UN is involved in this. If you come to the General Assembly, you'll be surprised at how well we talk to each other. And the countries talk to each other, the diplomats. And you might be at the UN tomorrow, you might represent the country at the UN tomorrow. You'll be very polite to the person next to you, even if you have disagreements. This is the ideal in the world that you are going to create, in the world that is to come. In my own world, there is still a lot of disagreements, but for you young people in future, there wouldn't be a lot of reasons to keep disagreeing. And we wouldn't be forced to use weapons. You might ask me why people are making nuclear weapons. I must say it's unfortunate we have nuclear weapons. I think the ideal thing would be that we don't have nuclear weapons so that we all laugh at each other, go out to a bar, have a beer, and be nice to each other. But in the real world, I think many people want arms because they are afraid that they will be attacked. But I am convinced that one day will come when it wouldn't be necessary to carry an arm so that you can be happy. So the future, I suspect, would be a future of unity. Even if once in a while there might be conflicts and people might fight each other. But humanity has three major problems. We have constantly, since for thousands of years, struggled with something some call hunger, how to put food on the table. I think most of you think of how to put food on the table every day. Then disease. There have been pandemics, and they might come when you're not looking for them. And then violence, the violence of the human being, especially against other human beings. I think this is one of the areas where we need to work on our culture as humankind. Very often we're so violent, and sometimes we even violent against ourselves, like suicides. When somebody commits a suicide, this is violence, but expressed not against another person, but the person herself or himself decides to be violent. So all these are issues you will be dealing with when you grow up, but they are important issues. But I'm confident that one day we will find solutions gradually to those issues. And then talking of pandemics, I mean, we're finding easy solutions because the last pandemic wasn't as terrible as the Spanish flu in 1919. The Spanish flu killed a lot of people. Well, at the time, very little was known about medication, and most people couldn't find a cure. This recent pandemic, I'm not saying that people didn't die, but the proportion of people that died wasn't as great as the one in the Spanish flu before, or as the number of people who died in the 14th century, in the 1300s. I think they called it dark something, black something. So these are all issues we have to deal with, but in reality, humanity can keep doing the best things and advancing towards a day when we'll be better than we are today. Thank you.
Thank you. You mentioned being happy to be here, and we're very much happy to have you with us today. The next question is going to go to Erica Weaver.
Your Excellency, How have you worked to ensure the inclusivity of small, less developed nations in the decision-making process at the General Assembly?
Okay, good question. At the General Assembly, we've done what is not done in other organizations. Each country has one vote. And when I chair a meeting, I will give the floor to anybody who asks for the floor. And when we do come to a point where we are obliged to vote, we take one vote per country. China has a population of 1,300,000,000 people. India, 1,400,000,000 people. But when we are voting, India will have one voice, China one voice, the US one voice, and even Tuvalu. Tuvalu has a population of 11,000 people. But at the UN, Tuvalu is a nation. So developing countries, large countries, rich ones at the General Assembly have the same voice. However, and I think your question wasn't addressed to that, but I addressed that. At the UN Security Council, there are 15 members, 5 of them permanent. You all know the permanent members. The US, China, Russia, France, Britain. And then 10 more members who are non-permanent. When there is a voting, when they vote, they all vote, one voice. However, if any of the permanent 5 members were to say no, the decision is vetoed. If they abstain, that's okay. But if they decide to cast a vote, one of them will block the decision. I mean, you're very mature, and I can make the following statement. The League of Nations was put in place in 1999. There were no vetoes foreseen. And President Woodrow Wilson was unable to convince the US Congress to become a member of the League of Nations. And I think for the United Nations to come into place, the big powers, the great powers, that's a better word, expression. I think Russia, Great Britain, and the US met in a meeting, I think it was Yalta or one of those places, and agreed that there should be a veto system. That one allowed for every great power to be in the tent. And everybody remains in the tent now. Partly, I think, because the veto exists. If the veto didn't exist, then we wouldn't have the United Nations as a whole going forward. And I think we're better off having every country in the UN rather than having powers which are out of the UN. So it might come with some disadvantages, but the totality is that we gain more than we lose in the present situation. And again, I was telling you that humanity has never had an organization like the UN. And the UN has done wonderful things. We're not in heaven, but we're not in hell. And I think it's important to keep the UN. And what we're arguing for is that we can make adaptations, make reforms here and there, but the UN as an organization is marvelous. If one didn't exist, we would create it. But in the General Assembly, all the countries have one vote. Thank you.
Your comments about the Security Council veto are a perfect segue into Nick's question about the council.
Yes.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Under your tenure, how would you like to see the UN Security Council reformed?
Good question. Why? Everybody now accepts. How do I know that? Last September, all the heads of state and government adopted by consensus the Pact for the Future. And the Pact for the Future draws one conclusion, that the UN Security Council requires reform. I think the word is reform. I mean, you could look for synonyms, adaptations, or whatever, but we're talking about the same thing. And presently, we have not let go the issue. There is an ambassador who is a facilitator representing the General Assembly, who is working on the issues of reform of the Security Council. And many other ambassadors are interested, and many countries are interested. Many parts of the world are interested. The United States has done a big thing. Under President Biden, it was announced that the United States agrees to a reform in the UN Security Council, and that the African continent will have 2 permanent seats. And I think the other members are discussing. So we are on the path to a reform. When this will happen, even if it doesn't happen under me, I am convinced it will happen. Because the present format, the present situation is not very useful, because very often quite some vetoes, and very often the discussions are not pleasing to you nor to me. So I think the reforms will come. We are working on the reforms, and I'm very optimistic. I am so optimistic that I believe eventually these reforms will be very useful to the UN as a system, not only to the UN Security Council. So I believe in the reforms, and I'm convinced they will happen. For instance, there's some agreement that having only 15 members in the Security Council goes back to 1965, when we didn't have 193 countries. Now that we have 193 countries, it's important that all parts of the world be present in the Security Council, all continents and all regions be present, so that the decisions will be better balanced. Why? Because in the Security Council, when they deal with peace and security issues, it's important that opinions come from all over the world. So I believe there will be reforms. We're working for that, and we're optimistic. Thank you.
Thank you. We'd now like to open the floor to a few questions from the audience. The one thing I would like to ask is that you just keep your questions brief so we can try to get to several of them. If you'd like to ask a question, just raise your hand, and Dean Edwards will make sure you get a mic.
Your Excellency, what legacy do you hope to leave at the end of your presidency of the UN General Assembly?
I didn't get you well.
Your Excellency, what legacy do you hope to leave at the end of your presidency of the General UN Assembly?
Legacy.
Legacy.
My God, that's a powerful question. And I have only spent about 7 months, so I have 5 months to go. And you're going to make me think very seriously. And I'm thinking now, my most important legacy would be that at the time I'm leaving the General Assembly, this is only for 1 year, the discussion on the reform of the UN Security Council, on the revitalization of the General Assembly should keep going. Even if there's yet no final solution, I will be optimistic that in future, under another president of the General Assembly, there will be good things. So my legacy is merely a dream at the moment. As you know, very often dreams become reality. Thank you.
Can I get you to stand up? Oh, yeah. Perfect. Hello today, Your Excellency. I would like to say merci beaucoup for allowing us to have the privilege to have you and your congregation visit today. I just want to know what lessons can other African nations learn from Cameroon's approach to regional integration and economic diplomacy?
Merci beaucoup. J'ai l'impression que vous êtes polyglotte. Félicitations. Okay. Well, I just say that I think he speaks a good number of languages, and I thanked him for it and congratulated him. Well, the African countries have gone very far. They may not be well developed, in quotes. I mean, development is a bit difficult to define, but mentally, the African countries have done very well. And as we keep going, they are going to be integrated more and more into the world. But first, on the African continent, we already integrated into the African Union, which is doing fairly well. And recently, the African Union got something marvelous. The African Union is now a full member of the G20. The G20 is not any openly powerful organization, but it's really important because it brings together the richest parts of the world, the richest countries. So the African Union is now a member. And African countries know that if you're not part of the real world, you are in deep trouble. And in Africa, all the countries know that it is important to be a part of the United Nations because we all want to look in the same direction. So all African countries, including Cameroon, are already doing that. Integration in the African Union and in the United Nations is extremely important. In fact, many of them will say it is a must. So we're already doing fairly well. Economically, we're not as rich as we would want to be, but we're far better than we used to be in the 60s. And a lot of the countries have two big advantages now. They have pretty highly educated people. It wasn't the case in 1960. And they know that an economy is not easy to build. It's quite easy to have political decisions taken, but economic decisions are not easy to handle. Why? Because the economy of a country depends on many, many factors. No matter how hard you work, the economies of other countries influence your own economy. So you could have your population working very hard, but the price of cocoa, the price of coffee is not determined in Africa. Probably some place where people drink a lot of coffee or eat a lot of chocolate. Probably in future it'll be different. So the economies are doing fairly well, but I'm happy to say that in future they will do better as the world keeps advancing. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question from the audience.
We'll get one from one of our student press.
Your Excellency, thank you for joining us today. How do you defer any confrontation or hostility in the GA environment?
What kind of hostility?
How do you diffuse any confrontation or hostility that comes up in the General Assembly?
Oh, thank you. At the General Assembly, the representatives of countries are called permanent representatives, or you could call them ambassadors to the United Nations, because they all have rank of ambassador. They are so well trained, like you, that during meetings, even when there is a disagreement, people don't shout at each other. They're very polite. So it makes it easy for the chairperson, for the president of the General Assembly, to listen. And if there's a point of order, he can hear everybody and thank them or say what he thinks should be done. So really, we've not had any incidents which require that there'd be a shouting battle. No, not yet. But it could happen, but the way things have gone, it's hardly happened. But I must also say that most of the ambassadors are not just well-trained, but very experienced. And also, the president of the General Assembly is not in his 20s, he's fairly old. And so he will listen carefully and choose his words carefully. so he doesn't annoy anybody. And I can tell you, in my experience, the ambassadors are marvelous at choosing the words they use. So really, there's been no problem, and I am not a prophet. I can't say what will happen in future, but up till now, it's been fine. Thank you.
Can I add something on that?
Yes, sir.
Just to say that the process within the General Assembly also is helping to avoid confrontation. A representative of one country is not speaking to another representative of another country. He's talking only to the President of the General Assembly. So that is this process that people are not shouting to each other, you know. If you are the representative of Cameroon, you cannot talk to the representative of Mali. You are speaking only to the President of the General Assembly, and that is avoiding conflict. Thank you.
And the President of the General Assembly can absorb every idea that comes, and no idea will kill the President of the General Assembly. Thank you.
What I'd like to do is allow a little time for informal gathering after the formal program ends. So what I'd like to do right now is to thank all of you for attending our session today. I would like to thank our guest, President Yang, for his insights, his candor, his time with us. And I'd like to invite one of our students, Vida Asari, to come up and present a small token of our appreciation.
Thank you very much. I was happy to be here, and this is a wonderful opportunity to meet with intelligent people like you are. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ambassador Yang and the members of the delegation. And we'll visit here for a few minutes, but you all are welcome to stay and enjoy the reception. For those of you that are headed home for Easter break, very much safe travels, and we look forward to having you back on campus after your holiday. So thank you all for coming today.